Now, the world, since Friday, continues to degenerate. I don't know how else to phrase it. The United States Marine Corps, HIM, starts out very simply. Many of you know the words. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. We fight our country's battles in the air, on land, and sea. First, to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean, we are proud to claim the title of United States Marine. Now, this is not to disparage anybody in the Marine Corps, but in all seriousness, to the shores of Tripoli appears to be now not so far out of sight as one might think. There is a news story in the UK press that David Cameron and other Western leaders, unidentified, but I think we can guess who they might be, are on the brink of ordering military action against Colonel Muammar Gaddafi amid fears that the Libyan dictator could use chemical weapons against his own people. Barf bags, anyone? So, we may send the Marines in to kill lots of Libyans to make sure that they are delivered into the hands of democracy. How asinine, how absurd, how despicable, how disgusting. Anyway, here to try to make sense of this insanity is Dr. Hesham Tillawi, PhD. Welcome back, Hesham.
Well, thank you, Jeff. We have John McCain and Joe Lieberman at Tahrir Square. They were there Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. Like, what is Joe Lieberman? Do Egyptians know who Joe Lieberman is? This is the man who very much asked to round up Muslims in the United States and put them in concentration camps. This is a man who very much wanted to introduce a law in the United States to basically strip Muslims out of their citizenship if they are pro-Islam. Very much it's so crazy that they go there to celebrate at Tahrir Square the Egyptian victory to remove their dictator, the same dictator that Joe Lieberman and John McCain basically raised and pampered. And there from Tahrir Square in Egypt, they called for the arming of the Libyan
freedom fighters. Freedom fighter. Aren't they calling them freedom fighters yet?
Freedom fighters. And at the same time, actually, you have the Israeli government is involved in actually bringing the mercenaries from Africa, from Chad, from Sudan, Niger, etc., to actually work with Gaddafi.
Is that right? I didn't know they were involved with it, but I figured there might be some dirty hand in there. That's interesting.
They are.
I'm concerned that once again the so-called American foreign policy will entangle us in yet another bloodbath, and it could well be a bloodbath in Gaddafi's Libya. To go in and try and throw the man out is obviously insane. We have no right, no business in there at all under any circumstance.
Israel was in a tough position here. Number one, they don't have enough settlers to actually stop a Palestinian state from being born. Number two, they could no longer drag the negotiations. Every prime minister, even including Sharon, have played this biggest lie game of, let's talk peace, let's talk peace. You hear the Israelis talking all the time, let's negotiate, let's talk peace. Well, yeah, you're dragging it. The Oslo Peace Agreement has been about, that was like way back in 1993. So now we are in 2011, so you can't keep talking and negotiating for 50 years. And so what's going to happen is actually the Palestinian Authority was moving at a very high speed in getting these recognitions from countries around the world. Well, the only way that Israel can actually throw a monkey wrench in this and stop everything is, number one, Israel needs time to build those settlements. The only way they can actually have that opportunity is, number one, if they can stop the Palestinian Authority from pursuing that road, which if they create these revolutions in the Arab world, they're going to have two things happen. Number one, Israel thrives when it's surrounded by enemies. Enemies that Israel can actually point at and say, you see, those people don't like us, they want to kill us. Jamal Abdel Nasser, who was the Egyptian president, back in 1967, he said that we're going to throw the Jews in the sea. Now, at that time, Jamal Abdel Nasser did not have the power to do that, but until today, the Jews are using what he said to basically tell the world that the democracy, the only democracy in the Middle East, the little old Israel is surrounded by all these vicious enemies who want to throw her in the sea. Well, in the last 20 years, things have changed. You have Egypt, you have Jordan, you have the Palestinian Authority, you have Qatar, you have almost the Arab regimes. They were saying, hey, Israel, the Arab peace plan was put way back in the year 2000, which basically said to Israel, welcome to live amongst us. But Israel is not finished with this expansion program yet. So Israel rejected the Arab peace plan of 2000. And with what was happening, Israel, these peace agreements and the friendship that it had garnered with the Arabs, it is becoming more of a liability, because when the Palestinian Authority had a problem with Israel, they used to go to the Egyptians, to Hosni Mubarak, and Hosni Mubarak and the Egyptians, as the big brother for the Palestinian Authority, used to interfere with the Israelis, and the game continued to go on. If Israel can somehow have, and it is, by the way, happening, the Arab streets are pulling back from Israel. The Arab streets look at the United States and the Zionist regime in Israel as very much the enemy. Now, even though the United States is trying to help take this dictator off and take that dictator off, believe me, the United States in the Arab streets is well known as a murderer, killer, as in bed with the Zionists. So no matter what the United States tries to do, at the end, if they topple, which they will, Gaddafi or anybody else, people on the streets are more revolutionaries, and that's exactly what Israel wants. What will serve Israel's needs right now is to have a regime in Egypt that is not so friendly. Now remember, no regime and all regimes in the Middle East put together, they will not be able to actually defeat Israel. And the United States will make sure of that. So Israel is not at a threat at all. But what will work for Israel right now is to actually have the Arab streets pull back, be more, I guess, not so friendly with Israel. And Israel will, in turn, tell the world, look, the Muslim Brotherhood is going to take over in Egypt. They're going to take over in Libya. They're going to take over here. They're going to take over here. And the Arabs don't want peace. Now, remember, the Palestinian Authority cannot, even if it wants to, cannot, under these new political conditions in the Middle East, pursue any negotiations with Israel, that's exactly what Israel wants, and that's what's going to give Israel another 20 years of basically saying, well, the Arabs don't want peace with us, and the Palestinian Authority will not be in power much longer because the leaders of that authority are ready to actually give it back to whoever gave it to them, because they realize that this Palestinian Authority is nothing but helping Israel control the occupied territories until it is time for Israel to take over the whole thing. Israel needs another 20 years, and that's what they want. What is happening right now in the Middle East will give Israel that 20 years to basically have another million settlers in the West Bank, and that will very much destroy any possibility for a Palestinian state in the West Bank, which the world will be looking for another solution for the Palestinians, which the Israelis already designed the other solution, which is the east bank of the River Jordan, where Jordan actually exists.
Right.
When you have majority of that country actually are Palestinian, and they're going to say that's where Palestine is.
That's the plan.
Yes.
Well, what's left of the Palestinians will end up in Jordan, and the king will have to modify his geopolitical stance and accept them, and that'll be Palestine. Well, you may well be right. You may well be right. It's either that or the open-air prisons will become open-air tombs for what's left of the Palestinian people. And if the world allows that to happen, I don't know. Well, the world has already allowed, we've slaughtered 2 to 3 million Iraqis, 2 to 3 million Afghanis. That's a Holocaust of huge proportions.